Roshni Goyate. I'm the co-founder of The Other Box, which is an award-winning company that celebrates people of colour and people from other underrepresented backgrounds in the creative industries. I'm also one of the 4 brown girls who write, which is a poetry collective. And I'm a mum, a sister, a wife, a friend, and a creative. The way I manage everything is by having a really great family support system. So I moved back, to have the baby, I moved back to Northwest London to be close to my parents. And they've proven to be, obviously, an amazing part of the support network. But we also have other friends and family around. We have a really great childminder. And we have to be really good at diary management, basically. It sounds a bit geeky, but I have to be so good with my time management too, because I'm literally juggling so many different timings and things. And kind of part of that as well is having to be very good with communication, which I'm not always perfect at, but it means I have to let my parents know if I'll need them and if I need them to help with looking after the kid, and let my childminder know when we'll be there, let my team members know, let Leah and my business partners know when I can be around, if I need to be offline and when I can make up that time. And yeah, it just takes a lot of good planning to be able to then have the space to be creative and to enjoy what I'm doing, to be in the moment. But I didn't see anybody like me in leadership positions. And so I felt this imposter syndrome, which is a word that I think is kind of used all the time now because it's so fitting. And really, I grew up in London, and in Northwest London, in Wembley, and the London I knew was so diverse. I grew up around neighbours from all parts of the world, loads of immigrant families around us and in school. And so that, to me, was my London. So when I got to the workplace in London and I didn't see that reflected, especially at leadership position, I really started to question why that was. Why was my London not being reflected in the workplace, in an industry where you can get paid quite well to do what you love and be creative? And I just felt like something needed to change. When I started having those thoughts, it was about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I didn't know what to do. I just started speaking with people about it. I just started saying, look, this is what I'm seeing. I'm looking at the judging lineups and the speaker lineups for big industry events and for the big prestigious awards. I'm looking at people who are the CEOs and MDs and the ECDs of agencies, and even in beyond the agency world, in the general creative industries and the arts. And I'm not seeing my stories reflected. I'm not seeing people that I can relate to in powerful decision-making positions. Why is that? And I actually think things like Brexit and Trump coming into power have really been a catalyst for mobilising people into going from that kind of questioning mode to action mode. And around the same time as The Other Box was founded in 2016, we later found, a couple of years on, that loads of other organisations and communities and platforms had popped up around the same time, born of that similar frustration. What I think is amazing is that for a lot of platforms and communities and our peers from The Other Box, we've found that from that frustration has come creativity, because I believe creativity is naturally about resourcefulness. And when we are lacking in resources, when we're living in austerity, when we're living in a time of cuts and a lack of representation, people have been mobilised to get resourceful, and things like the internet, I think, and social media have really proven to be a tool to empower people to have their voice heard and to find their tribe and to grow these communities where we can all come together in solidarity and action. I think personally I kind of have this twofold story. So prior to starting The Other Box, I had already been having these conversations with people, and that's how me and Leah came into each other's orbit, really. We had a mutual friend, but we kind of ended up at this diversity event. I think one of the things that was happening at the time was There were diversity panels and events happening, and the conversation was out there. But yet it was very focused on gender. So the conversation was still very focused on gender only, and it meant that it was very binary, male and female, and the women that were being given the platform were white women. So I just felt rendered invisible. I felt like my story wasn't valid, my voice. A lot of the time with this kind of stuff, you feel like you're imagining things. You're kind of being gaslit just by the mainstream narrative, which is that, which centres whiteness and centres, in the diversity conversation, it was centering female middle class whiteness. So for me, it was like constantly being like, am I imagining this? Do I need to be saying things? At the same time, I had some people very close to me who were not people of colour, they were white. And they were just like supportive of my work, but also just being like, well, what are you complaining about? Like, you've got a job, you know, you're doing well in your career. And that kind of questioning me made me doubt myself a lot. And then once Leah and I started The Other Box, I think one of the main things was we had to juggle our full-time jobs with the side hustle, which was The Other Box at the time. And it took a lot of energy from us. It took a lot of evenings and weekends and hustling, like we had to hustle. And if we were not in a position to have those extra energy resources, I think it would have been very, very tough. And in fact, both of us did suffer a level of burnout because we were just going at it really, really hard. We both had full-time jobs. I was also doing a master's at the time to do with the topic. And then we were doing The Other Box. And it was like, we found, and we still find that, you know, the work-life balance has kind of tipped in a way because we're committed to this greater mission. And we are absolutely committed to it, but it does take that level of like energy and vision and really committing to it. I would say, just get your story out there. Whatever form that takes. We've got so many platforms available to us. So whether your vibe is Facebook or Twitter, or you want to start a blog or Instagram, whatever it is, just start telling your story that feels genuinely true to yourself. Even if you're scared, there is a strength in that vulnerability. And that's what we found, is that once we started telling our stories as The Other Box, and we started sharing the stories of others who could relate, other people of colour or people who felt underrepresented in other ways, you'll find, and this is the thing I found with The Other Box, was actually, despite all my fears of having pushback and people telling me I'm imagining things, what actually happened was people felt the passion, they related to the stories, and we just attracted like-minded people. And that's the thing, you never know who you're going to attract with that. So you can't know until you've done it and you've put yourself out there a little bit. I'm not saying like bare your soul and tell all of your deepest, darkest secrets. Just tell a story that's relatable, whether it's something that happened to you that day or something that's occurred to you from your childhood. Just go for it and tell it. I think there's two things. So one of the first things about starting a platform like The Other Box is that we eventually decided to do it full time. And to do that, we had to face some very harsh realities, which is that it was a platform and it had got a very quick following as a brand. But then the flip side to it was the business. If we wanted to do it full time, this is going to sound really boring, but we had to have a business plan. And we had to be really clear. We've spent a lot of time doing this work. We had to be really clear on what sort of life we want to be living, because we couldn't just create something and allow it to take over. We needed to have a North Star. We needed to articulate what our mission was in a way that made us stand out from any other brand and helped us stay really focused, because opportunities were coming by us all the time and you just cannot say yes to every opportunity. even though at the start we did, because we were being really scrappy. So at the start we did say yes to every coffee, every meeting, every event we were asked to do, every interview. Over time we learned how to filter that. And that was based on our mission. And that was based on where we want the business to be going. And the word is business here. So the thing both Leah and I have learned as business women now is business acumen. What it means to like have a sales like funnel, what it means to be able to pay ourselves salaries, to start to grow a team. So that's the kind of business side of things. The flip side of that is the personal work that goes into running a business. So the work we do is emotionally challenging. We have a community of over 3,000 people who are sharing stories all the time of horrific things they've experienced at work or out on the streets or on public transport. We need to know that we're in a position to support that community. And in order to do that, we need to put in the work for ourselves to know what our journeys are, to be true to our stories, and to also understand our own triggers, our own traumas, and to work through that. Because otherwise we'll just be in fight or flight all the time, which is not healthy. As human beings, we're not designed to be in that kind of fight or flight. So we've armed ourselves with particular tools. As co-founders, we've basically had the equivalent of couples counselling so that we can communicate with each other in total honesty, openness and vulnerability, which is not something that comes naturally, I think, to most people, even if we are outwardly very emotive and emotional. I think as women of colour as well, we carry these like cultural backpacks that are to do with like when we're allowed to speak and how we respect our elders and all of that stuff. So we're kind of negotiating that all the time as women of colour as well. Again, when we look around us in the world of like entrepreneurs and startups, we don't see very many women of colour leaders. So in that way we are trailblazing, and it just takes a lot of self-work to make sure that we're not going to crumble. Yeah, I definitely think so. So for me, I'm from a very working class immigrant background. My dad, he worked in factories his whole life. Yeah, his whole life in this area actually. And for him, as immigrant parents, they were always just like, do the work, keep your head down, don't ruffle any feathers, get your salary and make a good life for yourself. Get your education, make a good life for yourself. For us, we just found that we cannot just sit back, or I don't know if it's just my personality type, but I found I couldn't just sit back and accept what I was seeing, especially when I was waking up every morning thinking about it. And yet, there still is that voice. I still have my dad's voice in my head, just being like, don't speak up about this, just do your work, just carry on as you are. And I understand that. Like, I get that when they arrived in this country as immigrants, they were literally getting beaten up. Like, my dad's got stories of getting beaten up for just being brown. And even now, like, that's really come up again. The violence and the aggression has come up again. And, it's not just physical. If you're online and you've got a voice and you want to say something, you're subject to racist trolls, faceless, racist, anonymous trolls who have, no censor, nobody stopping them. So to put yourself out there, especially as a brown person, as a brown woman, you're opening yourself up to that, and then the sexism and the kind of, again, the imposter syndrome. I think recently we were having a conversation about nazar and how, like over adoration or like putting yourself out there too much opens you out to nazar. And it's a superstition thing. Depending on where you are in the world, where you're from in the world, nazar takes on a different thing. But for me, it was just always like, if you put yourself out there, if you're in the public eye too much, and if you're opening yourself for over adoration, then you're opening yourself up to nazar, and it gets inside you. And me and Leah have joked about how this really subliminally kind of holds us back in a way, or it just makes us question ourselves, or it stops us from celebrating ourselves. And in order to like counteract that, we've made it we've made it a rule, basically, an unwritten rule within the other box to celebrate ourselves, no matter how big or small the achievement. So it could be that we won an award and we would celebrate that. It could be that we just had a really great conversation with somebody. It could be that we're doing something like this and we want to celebrate everything because we've always got that voice that in the back of our head, like, keep yourself away from the evil eye. So those little nuanced things, they are floating around all the time.